All right, this is the last bike in the bike flip group. This is the Giant Boulder. So yesterday the seat post came in. We were missing the seat post from the original bike and I had to order it. So what we're gonna go through now is just recabling the bike. Just the derailleurs I think need to be done. The brakes seem okay. Show it here. Front wheel spinning fine. Got good brakes. And then same thing for the rear. Just have to manually spin it here. Spinning freely and has good brakes. So really what we're gonna do is just replace the frayed shifting cables, put a new chain on, and then that's gonna be about it. So this should be a pretty easy bike as well. All right, so this is the front shifter. This is a trigger style shifter because you have these little triggers. So there's one up here and then there's one back here. You can actually hear it clicking. Obviously the cable's really frayed and messed up, so we got to replace it. I've already cut it. You should really get a good pair of cable cutters. This is not only good for just cutting the bikes as you go through to rebuild them, but get you nice and clean cut once you put a new cable in. So just wanted to showcase that. And then on the trigger shifters, in this case, this one has two Phillips heads. So I'm going to remove them. And this is going to get us access to the derailleur cable inside. So I want to be very careful and not lose those. And then while we're in here, we'll also lubricate all the pawls, make sure everything's moving freely. It sounded good, so I don't think we have any issues there. I'm gonna pull this off, remove some of the cobwebs, and then pull this up so you can see a little better. So in here, the cable comes around and is actually mounted right there. And then this whole mechanism clicks and pulls it through, and then obviously the numbers are changing to indicate to you as the rider what gear you're in. So I'm going to pull that cable out, we'll clean this up a little bit and then put some lubrication, new cable, and then we'll measure the housing. Okay, so I cleaned it up and I put some lubrication in here. Not that it's much different from before, but it is moving smoother. You can feel that it's moving smoother. If it's really gummed up, you can put it through the ultrasonic cleaner and then re-lube it after that as well. So I'm going to install the new cable. It's very important to make sure you have the right cable, not just the diameter. I mean, most of these, from what I've experienced, are fine. What you're really looking at is the length, because your rear derailleur and your front derailleur are going to be shifting differently, so they have different lengths. So you want to make sure you get the right cable in. So I'm going to put that in, close it all up, and then we'll measure the housing. All right, so I got the cable installed. I reattached the cover. Now what we're going to do is measure from the anchor point back here up to the shifter how much cable housing we need. So if you have a kit that you purchase from Amazon, it's going to be really long, probably about 6 feet or so, and you'll need to cut that accordingly. What I do is I use some old airline tubing from my aquarium, and then I cut it based off of the reel that I have. So I have a big bulk reel of the cable housing. So I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm just going to roughly outline it here. What you want to keep in mind is that the bike will be turning, and you don't want to have a cable housing that's too short. If it's too short, so if I pull it like this, I'm trying to show it here, it's already kind of hard. As I turn, it's going to get taut, and then that's going to actually shift you. So the cable will start moving in the housing because you're adding extra tension. So you want to leave enough to where it's not just dangling around, obviously, too much, but not too short to where it's going to cause an issue. So I'm going to get it roughly set to where I want it, just double checking the length here. I pinched it with my finger, and now what I'm going to do is go over to my cable box or reel and then cut the appropriate amount. All right, so I went and cut it, but I did want to show, and try and line this up here, the differences between the cables. So the cable on the left is the shift cable, so it's a smaller diameter, it has little flexible wires already in there. And then the one on the right is for brake cables, so it's larger and it's more robust, so it's wound differently. So they are different, so you want to make sure you use the right ones. You can use brake for the shifter if you absolutely had to. I don't recommend it. I'd say just stick with what it's actually supposed to be. All right, and then finally, you want to take the raw cable end. Again, it's kind of hard here trying to get it to focus. And you want to put a cap on it. So this is the actual cap. Again, trying to focus, sorry here. These caps will provide that rigidity and will allow the cable to push more effectively and last longer when being pushed up against these mounting points. So I'm going to tack this last one on here, then I'll route the cable through, then the cable is going to go down to a guide on the bottom of the bike and then up to the derailleur where we'll attach it. Once we get the front and the rear derailleur attached, we'll tune the bike with the chain on it. Alright, so I'm going to get that attached there. I'm going to bring this down. If you have cable clips or anything where you want to put all these together, it'll make it look cleaner. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is, and then I'm going to route this down at the bottom and then reconnect it. Alright, so we're down near the bottom. What we're going to do now is take the cable. I'm going to route it through the bottom here. I'm going to probably have to come around to do this. I'll route that through here. And then it needs to come up. And just grab it here real quick. And then this style has a guide on the back side, down through the top. And then that has a slot right here that it goes through. And it came out. So trying to do this without blocking the camera as always is a little tricky. Probably loosen it a little more might have helped too, so let me try that. There we go. So now I got it seated in the channel. Gotta put my tool back together because it's falling apart. And we're just going to connect it, and like I said later, what we'll do with the chain on is we'll tune everything. So not immediately worried about if we're in the right gear. I think I did shift it all the way down to lowest, and if not, we'll correct that later. So we have that on. Just going to quickly push on it here. So it is moving. And what we'll have to do is just tune it later. So now what we'll do is the same process, but we'll do it over here for the rear derailleur. Same thing as before. I'll remove the cable up from the trigger shifter, replace the housing and the cable obviously, and then route it all the way down here. Only difference is that this also has a second piece of cable housing that has to go on for the rear. Alright, so I've added in the cable and housing for the rear derailleur. Show it over here. Gonna leave a little bit of cable on until we're fully done so I know exactly where to cut it, but I'm gonna shift through the gears right now. So all looks good. Now what we'll do is attach the chain and then we'll tune the bike. Alright, so we got the chain installed. Now what we're gonna do is work on the rear derailleur. So I'm gonna detach the cable. The reason I'm doing this is I don't want any influence from the cable. So it's moving, so there's no influence right now. What we wanna do is check the limiting screw on the high end to make sure it's properly set. The way we know it's properly set, we can eyeball it, or the better way, in my opinion, is to spin it up and listen for noise. A noisy drivetrain is an inefficient drivetrain, so you want it to be nice and smooth, nice and quiet. If you hear any clinking or other types of noise, it means it's more than likely out of adjustment. So I'm going to spin it up and listen real quick. It's pretty good. There's an instance or two every now and again of it, and based on what I can eyeball, I think what we want to do is actually just decrease that limit screw a little bit. So I'm going to back it off about a quarter turn. Try it again. So it's nice and smooth. There's some rubbing up here, which we'll get once we get up to the front derailleur. But for now, it feels good. I've already turned this all the way in and then backed that out a little bit so that we have some variability. Now what we're gonna do, get my little pliers here, is make sure we have some, or we pull it through with no slack. So I'm gonna also make sure we're in the highest gear. So we're gonna get that lined up. Okay, turn that on. Now what we're going to do is start shifting. So this is a trigger index shifter, so one click up should give us one gear, which it did. Next gear, I hit it, and it's not quite making it. You can hear it. Now it jumped. So again, one up, hit it again, and it went. So it hesitated the first time, so I'm going to loosen the barrel adjuster just slightly. And again, it's still hesitating, so I'm going to tighten it a little more. And it jumped. Okay, so that seems good. So now I'm going to go down to the middle chainring up front. Make sure that our shifting is still going the way we want it. That seems fine. We're going to go all the way down. And then the last one. I'm gonna eyeball it again. Looks like it's a little too tight now, so I'm gonna back it off just a little bit. So maybe about a half turn. Drop it down, go back up. And it seems good. So now we'll work on the front derailleur. So now that we have the rear derailleur pretty much set, we're going to work on the front derailleur. So I have it in the largest gear in the back, which is your lowest gear. And then we're going to align the cage here, try and pick this up and show you, to where it needs to be. So just like on the rear, without any tension on the cable, there should be an alignment that is present. So in this case, what we're going to do is take the cable off, and then the cage on the inner side needs to almost hit the chain. So I'm going to set this down and we'll get that set up. Alright, so I removed the cable, and now what I'm going to do is move the cage over. It would help if I did the right limiting screw. There we go. So now the cage is almost hitting the chain. It's a very quiet drivetrain, which is what we want. So now we're going to reattach the cable. Make sure that we're in the lowest gear, so I'm clicking the trigger adjuster, or the trigger shifter I should say, making sure the barrel adjuster is turned out a little bit so we can play around with it. And now I'll reattach the cable and we'll go through the tuning. We're going to test out this angle and see if it works. For filming, that is. So we're in the lowest cog, middle. I'm going to drop the rear down a few gears. A little bit of rubbing. That's okay considering that was the second to largest gear. Drop it down. It went back down, which is good. So I'm going to shift it back up. Now we're going to go to the highest cog. That worked perfectly. Drop it down, drop it down. Go back to the middle. Go up a couple gears. And drop it down again. So it's hesitating a little bit. So what I want to do is loosen the cable. So I'm going to turn the barrel adjuster in just a little bit. Maybe a little more. And it's still not dropping. So I think the limiting screw is a little too far out now. Probably had a little bit of cable stretch, or the cable probably set in a little bit too, so we might have to readjust it there. Alright, now we're going to shift up to the middle again. Now it's not making it, so I'm going to add some of that tension I removed back. Okay, here we go. Looks good. Shift up. Down, drop it again, perfect, and it dropped. So That's all good. I think we're ready to test the bike. All right, so it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna take it out for a quick test spin and then we'll run through the cost. Brakes are good. Works good, shifts good, brakes good. Should be a good sale for whoever gets it. Alright, so it's time for a cost breakdown of the Giant mountain bike. Its portion of the entire group was $30. We spent $9 on a chain, $5 on cables. The seat was free because we had it donated from a good friend of ours. If we had to pay for it, obviously it'd be a little more, or if we had a spare one, it would just be the value of the spare. In this case, $0. And the seat post was a net $5 cost as well. So total, we're in the bike for $49. We're estimating sales at a minimum to be between 80 and 100. I think this quality of bike can go for well more than that, but we'll see how much patience I have waiting for somebody to buy it. So our profit at a minimum would be between 31 and 51 for maybe about an hour's worth of work. It took longer to film than it really did to throw it together. So pretty good overall. Now I'm going to erase this and then we'll go through the entire cost for the whole group. All right, time to go through the entire group. So we purchased the 3 bikes for $80. We spent $10 on gas to go pick them up and bring them back. Combined, we spent $33 on parts, so the grand total is $123. Sales for all of them, based on my estimates, are going to be between $210, $260 or more. I'm definitely hoping more because these are some nice quality bikes. That means our profit is between $87 and $137, depending on where we fall, so not bad at all. We spent about an hour to go get them and come back. We spent about an hour on each bike, so about 3 hours total there, and grand total roughly 4 hours. Now, obviously, we also have to dedicate time to sell them on Facebook or on OfferUp, so maybe tack on another hour there, who knows, but honestly, at this point, we're pretty much done, so I'm gonna base it off of that hour total. So our profit per hour worked, in this case, would be between 22 and 34 or more, depending on where they end up. So I'm gonna just walk back and look at them real quick again. So we have the Giant that we just finished. It looks really nice and clean. We have the Specialized right here. And then behind that is that Diamondback. So pretty typical bike flip group. Pick them up in bulk. That way we cut down on the cost per bike when it comes to the gas. And yeah, so we lucked out, really didn't have any major issues. And I think we turned a pretty good profit. So we'll look for the next group and probably another series here before too long.